Hey y'all, and welcome back, or if you're new around here, hello and welcome. My name is Katie Marie and we are back for another would I buy it again if it just disappeared out of my collection one day. Now I did this video once already on my channel. I'll go ahead and link it up here and also down in the description box. Now this video idea was created by Dahlia Mama Beauty. I believe she had the idea, reached out to Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner, and they collabed on the very first video. You guys were so kind to let me know that in my first video, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I link them from the start and mention them here at the beginning. But just to let you know who created it, if you're at all interested in doing this video or just watching more content like this, definitely check out both ladies' channels. But yeah, in that very first video I said, you know, to make this a little bit more interesting, I'd love it if you guys would pick the palettes that I have to decide if I would repurchase them or not. And you guys were so kind to leave me a ton of comments naming the palettes that you would like to see, so I grabbed the first 10 comments that I saw and wrote down. So I went ahead and picked 10 palettes from those comments and we were going to go through them today. I just selected them, haven't really put any thought into them, so I can't wait to get started. Let's go ahead and just roll the intro and jump right into deciding and, you know, asking myself the question, if they disappeared, would I repurchase them or not? All right, so first up is a comment from Sharon Luz, and I believe that's how you pronounce her username, I should say, but she left me several, so let's go ahead and start from the top. The first one was the e.l.f. and Jkissa To the Rescue palette. This one brings back so many memories. I'll go ahead and leave the video where I featured this and did a video using this palette down in the description box if you're at all curious, but this is a fun rainbow palette, and I remember being so excited because it was like a row of lights, a row of darks, a row of shimmers. I was super happy with that. This shade has been sadly, you know, broken and just pretty much all gone in my collection, probably from all the moves and children and who knows what. But anyway, it has been a long time since I've opened this and really thought about this palette. I remember enjoying, for the most part, this half of the palette. I remember not being super impressed with the reds, and the orange and reds were decent, they were fine, but I remember specifically the reds I wasn't a big fan of. So looking at it now, trying to think about it, you know, if I wanted to have a good drugstore rainbow palette, I might pick this up again if it disappeared out of my collection. I do remember creating a lot of really beautiful looks with it, and like I said, for the most part, green and maybe even yellow over, you know, this half of the palette at least, I really did like, and I thought it was great. It was just a couple of shades over here, and also too, I think with the oranges, I kind of complained that the oranges were so close together, like the colors, and even the reds a little bit. But anyway, as a whole, I remember really enjoying this. So with this being e.l.f., with this being an affordable rainbow palette, would I want to pick it up again? I probably would, just to have, you know, like an affordable rainbow option in my collection. But like, if I wasn't on YouTube, it disappeared out of my collection, would I miss it and want to repurchase it just to have and actually, you know, use when I wanted a good rainbow palette? Probably not. So I don't know where that lands me with this video, because I am on YouTube and I like to have those options and, you know, those references for you guys whenever I'm doing videos like that, which I need to do, ranking all of my rainbow palettes, and this will be in there for sure. But anyway, I think for the sake of this video, would I repurchase it? Let's just pretend I don't keep palettes for reference on YouTube. I wouldn't repurchase this because there's a lot of really great rainbow palettes I have in my collection. The one off the top of my head is a Blend Bunny palette. Blend Bunny Cosmetics has 2 or 3 rainbow palettes, depending on, I guess, how you deem a rainbow palette, but I own 2 of them, the Blends palette and the Primal palette, that I consider fantastic rainbow palettes and I absolutely love. So with that in mind, with the quality of those in mind, and those, the Primal palette also kind of reminds me of this color story, with the shimmers kind of corresponding with the colors that they have for the mattes and giving you lots of options with lighter and darker. I'd probably pick the Blend Bunny Primal palette over this one, so no, I don't think I would repurchase. Next up, Sharon mentioned the Natasha Denona Circo Loco palette. This palette is a gorgeous palette. I really do like the color story. I think it's a lot of fun. I remember the looks that I created with this palette being so very fun. And it's definitely one of the most unique and colorful palettes that Natasha has ever done, for sure. So there's a lot about this palette that I really do like. Like I said, unique color story, definitely the most colorful palette that I've ever seen from Natasha Denona. However, it was expensive. It was over $100. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, 128, 126. It was an expensive palette, and for how expensive it was, for how often I use it, I feel like it's one of those palettes I kind of regret in my collection. Like, yes, I bought it, I was curious to try. Everyone always raves and, you know, talks up about Natasha Denona's formula, and I was always so curious to try it. So when she actually launched a palette that I was interested in, the color story, I felt like I had to get it. But now that I've tried it, I'm like, okay, like her formula is really nice. But I don't know, it doesn't like wow me so much to make the price tag worth it. So for me, this is a bit of a regret purchase. It's a nice formula. I'm not saying it's not. Like, she has a very, very nice formula. But for me, having so many indie brands that I absolutely love, and I think the formula is fantastic as well, that's where the price tag just doesn't hit it for me. And I've kind of admitted to myself, I'm just not a luxury girl. So while I like the fact that I got to try this, however, I don't think I would repurchase this if it disappeared out of my collection for sure. Now that I've tried it, I'm like, okay, I've kind of done it. I've tried the brand. I'm good. I've tried the brand, so I can say that I've tried the brand. But as far as like thinking the brand is worth it or enjoying owning and using it a lot, not really, especially with my collection. I just have, so many palettes that I'm always using and trying new ones. It definitely isn't worth the price for me. So if it did disappear out of my collection, or if one of my sons broke it or something like that, and I was sitting there going like, oh, do I want to repurchase this? This is an easy no for me. It's just too expensive. The next palette Sharon wanted me to pull out was the DeDe Signature, the Neutral Wonders palette. Now DeDe Signature is no longer open. They did have to close down their brand, but this is, I think, the last palette or one of the last palettes that she launched before closing her brand. And it is a, as you can see, very neutral palette, but her shimmers, DeDe Signature did something always so special with their shimmers. They were always so beautiful, so blinding, so smooth. I always loved them. So the shimmers in here are definitely special, but the mattes in here for me were just a little bit, they weren't very inspiring or exciting to use. So when I sit here and look at it, part of me wants to say like, yes, I would repurchase this because you can't get the brand anymore. So like nostalgia, like I want to have it in my collection. However, if it did disappear and I was sitting there going like, okay, do I want to repurchase this to own it and have it again? Not really, because this is a palette that I'm not going to miss. And like I said, when it comes to neutral palettes, it just wasn't a neutral palette that excited me that much when it came to the mattes. The shimmers were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But the mattes, I just felt like these two were too close and these two were too close. You could have changed them out with different colors to get a little bit, I don't know, something different or something more exciting. Put some grungy browns in there. I would have been into that. But anyway, overall, not to review the palette, but if I had to answer the question, this disappeared, would I repurchase it? I don't think so. So far, 3 palettes in, 3 palettes I would not repurchase. Okay, next step, and the last one that Sharon mentioned was the Milan Rowe Poison Ivy palette. This is a collab that DoodlesBytheBunny did with Milan Rowe. My palette is so dirty. I've moved a couple times. It's always a little bit rough in the move. My palettes get a little bit banged up. But anyway, this palette right here, I did purchase. I haven't been saying, I'll just stick it up in the corner from now on since I forgot for this video, but I did purchase this one. So would I repurchase this? There's aspects that I love about it, aspects that are just like okay about it. I think the biggest like okay part of this palette is just that, yes, it's a green theme palette, but it's not exactly my favorite type of green. Like I tend to like either really vibrant, like neon lime green, or really grungy type of greens. Those are my favorites. And these are more of like a muted type of green that, I don't know, the hue is just a little bit different than what I like my favorite type of greens. I know it's getting nitpicky here, but you guys know I love greens. But these are, if I had to rank all of my favorite shades of green, this shade or these types of greens would probably be on the lower spectrum of things. And especially with these more cool tone colors in here, when you combining with these other greens, it tended to make a more neutral type of green or more softer tones. I did a multiple looks video on this palette, so if you want to check out the type of looks I was able to get, you can definitely check that video out. So as a whole, while I really did enjoy this, would I repurchase it? I think I would though, because in saying that it's not my favorite type of green, I don't have very many of these tones of greens in my collection, and it's definitely a beautiful green palette, and it gave me a different, hue, different type of color story than a lot of the greens that I have in my collection. So it's more unique of a type of color story when it comes to greens for my collection, which I do like having unique color stories and whatnot. So with this palette, I really did enjoy it. The matte formula in here was gorgeous. I remember just loving how the mattes blended, and the shimmers I really did enjoy. Some of, there were different formulas, so I preferred some over the others, but as a whole, the looks that I got were very pretty. Oh, and they did have a pressed glitter, and it's a pressed glitter I actually really liked. I didn't have a lot of issues with it. It stayed on my eyes very nicely. It was very beautiful. So this is going to be one that if it disappeared out of my collection and I had the opportunity to repurchase and bring it back into my collection, yes, I would repurchase it. Okay, Pamela Pace left a comment and said the Kaleidos Sci-Fi Greens palette, which this was my very first Kaleidos purchase. This was the only palette I picked up of their Futurism collection. This is the Futurism 1 palette, which looks like this. Such a nice palette. I think I was pregnant with Levi when I got this, and I had just moved from Virginia to Florida. So lots of memories with this palette. I remember enjoying it and just having such a great time with it. The mattes being beautiful, the shimmers being stunning. Would I repurchase this again? Oh, that's such a hard question. I think so, just because when it comes to these tones, and even up here with the more like a mustardy orange type of shade up here, I really like those tones, and when you combine them all together, they're so pretty. These two shades, I was a little bit upset or just disappointed that they were so very close, because they're kind of like you need one or the other. But the black was so nice, the shimmers were beautiful. Again, the shimmer's a little bit close. So there's aspects that I could definitely nitpick with this palette, but as far as like owning it and having it in my collection, Oh, this is one I'm very much on the fence with. Like, I'm 50-50 saying like, no, I wouldn't need to rebuy it because I have other palettes that are like this, color story wise and theme wise, that I really do enjoy. But I love how tiny this is. I love how compact it is. It's a great little travel palette. I've definitely taken it with me to travel and whatnot when I'm only gone for a couple days because I can get some looks that I absolutely love. So I feel like I would repurchase this. Oh, this one's so hard. What am I gonna say? Would I repurchase it or not? I don't like to be on the fence for these videos because that's kind of defeats the purpose of them. So would I repurchase it? You know what? I probably would. I just like the packaging. I just like the quality of Kaleidos cosmetics. They're very nice. Like, it's such a strong magnet. It's nice and, you know, petite. I like the, you know, decoration of it. There's a lot about this palette that I really like. So even beyond the color story and the quality of the shadows, I do like owning it. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, for the sake of this video, yes, I would repurchase. Okay, next up, the comment I got was from Salah Ali. I know I butchered it, but I'm putting it on the screen here so you know your username, and I just want to shout you out. I'm so sorry, I struggle when it comes to pronouncing things, but she said the September Rose Slush palette, which is a great pick because you guys know how long I have loved this palette. I was very late to the game, but when I finally did pick it up, I was just all about this palette. Like, I couldn't stop talking about it and mentioning it in videos, and I still mention it in videos. I just mentioned it in my top 10 summer palettes. If you missed that video, I'll leave it linked up here in the cards. But yeah, this is just such a great palette. Not impressive now that I've tried so many amazing shimmers. The shimmers in this palette, you know, just looking at it, I'm like, oh, they're just fine. They have a lot of color to them, but not a lot of sparkle or anything like super special or shifty. They're just nice, you know, pigmented type of shimmers. Very smooth and easy to apply, but nothing, you know, nothing super special, just like what's been coming out in the market in recent years. But the mattes in here, I remember having a great time with it. It doesn't get super dark though, is something that surprises me because I really like to go dark. There's probably 3 shades I would say that are nice and deep, but not, and I remember combining them together to get them even more, get even more depth in my outer corner. So anyway, would I repurchase this or not? If I'm talking straight from just nostalgia, I'd be like, yeah, I'd repurchase it just because I like to have it in my collection. It's like my first OG rainbow palette when it comes to the palettes in my collection. But when I'm thinking about rainbow palettes in my collection, again, it goes back to Blend Bunny, and I would definitely pick the Primal or the Blends palette over this one. So when I'm thinking about that, if this disappeared out of my collection, I have the Primal and the Blends. It's not very necessary for me, so I probably wouldn't spend the money on it. So I'm gonna say I wouldn't repurchase. However, if September Rose was coming out with a new palette and I was gonna pick that up to review or just to own, this might be a palette that I would just like throw into my order, but I wouldn't go out of my way to purchase it. Does that make sense? Or if they were having like a crazy sale on this, then I would be like, okay, let me grab it and just to have in my collection, because it does have a lot of nostalgia for me. But as far as like going out of my way to repurchase it and put it back in my collection, no. I'm gonna say, for the sake of this video, no, I wouldn't repurchase it just because I have a lot of fantastic, really good quality rainbow palettes in my collection now. Okay, next up, Salah. Again, I'm so sorry, but she also said the Shroud and Baddie Bean It's Freakin' Bats palette. Oh my goodness. Let's talk about the palette in a minute because I just want to jump in and say, like, of course I would repurchase it. Kind of giving it away here, but this palette right here, so unique, so beautiful. There's so much about this palette that just stands out and just it stands the test of time. But yeah, the color story is just so unique and special. It's a collab with Baddie Bean. It's Shroud Cosmetics, so the formula is just so nice. The shimmers in here are so easy to apply, easy to work with, and the mattes in here are so blendable. There are more shimmers than mattes in this palette, but this is one of those palettes that, like, I don't mind having more shimmers than mattes because it's just such a fantastic palette. And yeah, very unique color story. Even how many years has this been out? 2 years later? I can't even remember. 3 years later? It's still such a unique and gorgeous color story. And I know a lot of people had a hard time picking this up when it launched because there was such a big demand for it, but I hope it was worth the wait because the color story and the quality of the palette is just so very nice. I still love it, and I absolutely, yes, if this disappeared out of my collection, I would repurchase it. And this might even be a palette that, since it is like limited edition, you know, a collab palette, if it wasn't available on Shroud Cosmetics website anymore, this would be a palette that I would be like looking at Mercari and Poshmark trying to purchase, and I wouldn't mind paying a little bit extra than the retail price for it to pick it up because I love this palette so much and the color story is just so very beautiful. And like I said, still to this day, there's a couple palettes that have come out that have kind of had similar vibes, but There's something special about this one that has stood the test of time, and yeah, she did a great job with it. All right, next up, Salah also said the Nomad Cartagena Mágica palette. I want to say this is the first palette I tried from Nomad Cosmetics, and as much as I absolutely love it, like it's a great orange, red, yellow type of color story, I really do like it, and there's just so much, like I said, so much about this palette that I like. If it disappeared out of my collection, I don't think I would repurchase, because there's not depth in here that I like when it comes to this type of eye look that I can get from this palette. This is like kind of the deepest it goes, and it wasn't deep enough for me. So anytime I like see this palette, I'm always thinking of the Extra Spicy by Give Me Glow that I absolutely love, and has the deepest, most beautiful reds that you could ask for in a yellow, orange, red type of color story. So while I think that the Nomad Cartagena Mágica and the Extra Spicy from Give Me Glow would pair beautifully together, if this disappeared out of my collection and I had the Extra Spicy one, I could just use the Extra Spicy one and be super happy. So as much as I love the color story, the shimmers, the mattes, everything about this palette was really nice, I probably wouldn't repurchase this. Yeah, especially because when it comes to Nomad, there's a lot of other palettes that they've launched since this palette that I really do love, so I could at least have those Nomad palettes in my collection. But this one, if I had to rank my Nomad palettes, which I need to do very, very soon, but if I had to rank them, this would probably get towards the lower end of it. So if it did disappear out of my collection, I could live without. So no, I would not repurchase. Next up, she also asked me to pull out my Juvia's Place, the Zulu palette, which I really do like. This is definitely one of my favorite palettes from Juvia's Place. Not my #1 favorite from them, but towards the top for sure, because the color story is just so fun, and you just get so many creative looks with this palette. Would I repurchase this? Oh, that's so hard to say. The shimmers that they put in this palette, along with the mattes, it was just a really nice combo. I remember this purple, I had a really great time with it, no big issues. I remember creating looks with just these three that I really did like, all matte, absolutely beautiful. And then these shimmers here were definitely my favorite. I really do like this palette. And it is rather, I feel like, unique from other palettes that I have in my collection when I just think about it. I see you, Mr. Levi. So I feel like this would be a palette I would pick up, especially because it's Juvia's Place and I can pick it up at Ulta, I can wait for a sale, I can use a coupon. I would say that I'd probably pick this one up because, again, I feel like it's a little bit more unique. Maybe I'm not thinking of palettes that are like super similar to it, but it's a more a fun, unique, different type of color story. It's drugstore, it's affordable, it's Juvia's Place, it's great quality, it's got nice shimmers and mattes in it. So if it did disappear out of my collection, I could totally see myself throwing it in an Ulta order at some point in the future. I wouldn't be in a rush to pick it up, but I would want to have this back in my collection. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to say yes, I'd pick it up again. Okay, last up, I just want to pick 10 for this video, but her last palette that I'm going to pull out is the At Forest Sight Colourpop and RawBeautyKristi palette. This palette, I'm not the biggest fan of Colourpop eyeshadows, I feel like, especially their mattes. I feel like I have had issues in the past, and I don't know, I just have other ones that I like more and whatnot, but this palette I really did like, I will admit, and I don't know if it's the quality was just a little bit nicer or just the color story was a little bit closer to my heart, so I didn't mind their formula, like working with their formula as much, but whatever the case is, I love this palette. The palette packaging as well. Colourpop always does their palette packaging amazingly well. Like, it's always so stunning. So I love the packaging. It's so beautiful. It's a display piece in the back right here. I always love to have it because I think it's so visually stunning. And then the color story inside is beautiful as well. This is a neutral palette that I love. Like, I loved every look I did with it. It's got more mattes than shimmers. It's got two shimmers, which are very pretty, and I loved incorporating in looks. So I feel like I'm giving it away right here, but if this disappeared out of my collection, this is definitely a palette that I would repurchase. And again, maybe not to go too crazy high like the Shroud and Batty Bean palette. I'd probably spend a good bit more money on it to get in my collection. This one, while I do like owning it, definitely, it would hurt a little bit more. It would take me a lot longer to spend a ton more money on it just because it is Colourpop. But if it was in stock, I could get it around the price of the retail price for it. I definitely would pick this up again just because, again, visually, I think it's so beautiful. I love these tones. I hope that's not annoying. He's playing with my brushes. But I love the tones in this palette. I love the tones in the color story. Like, everything about this palette is just so aesthetically pleasing, and the tones in this palette are definitely my type of tones. So yeah, I really like having it, and I would be really sad if it disappeared. So yes, if this disappeared out of my collection, I would repurchase. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there at 10 palettes. I know she had another palette in her comment, but we'll go ahead and I'm gonna hold that back and just add it to my next video because I already have a ton more palettes. You guys were awesome to leave me comments, so I almost have enough for 10, I think. So if you wanna leave me any comments, you guys can see the palettes back here. You guys have seen my recent palettes that I've reviewed. If you've been around a long time, you can scroll through my channel and see, and if you would like to leave a comment on which which palette you would like me to pull and say if I would repurchase or not. I would really appreciate that, and we can just continue this on. If not, I'll probably just have my daughter grab some random palettes from the back here and just add it to it so I can get 10 more palettes, and we'll do this video again in a couple more weeks, a month, something like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys really enjoyed the first video. I really enjoyed filming the first video. So yeah, that is gonna do it for me for this video. But like I said, definitely feel free to leave comments down below, and if I have more than 10, like I said, I'm just gonna keep a list going, and anytime I have 10 palettes and I want to sit down and do this type of video, I will do it, and we'll just make it a little series on my channel. So with that said, that is gonna do it for me. Thank you guys so very much for watching. As always, I really do appreciate it. If you want to continue getting content from me, I'm over on Instagram. I'm LadyKatie92 over there, and I post reels, up close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. With that said though, I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.